Imagine a really powerful part of the government trying to just shut down an entire cabinet agency, something that affects millions of people, you know?
Yeah, it sounds pretty extreme.
Right. We're talking about the Department of Education here, impacting students, schools, everything. Well, it's not imaginary. It's actually been happening.
And that's exactly what we're diving into today. There's this recent Supreme Court decision, but maybe more importantly, a really powerful dissent that basically lifts the lid on this huge legal fight over whether the Department of Education should even exist.
Wow.
Yeah, it gets into the administration's efforts to, well, effectively close the department, the arguments from a dissenting justice, and, what it could all mean for, well, for everyone involved in education.
Yeah.
And maybe the balance of power itself.
So our goal here is to kind of cut through the dense legal stuff, right? Get to the heart of the conflict, figure out what actions are actually taken, and what the real world fallout could be for, for you listening, for the whole education system.
Exactly. We're pulling out the key bits, the surprising details from this fascinating Supreme Court document.
And our main source for this is Justice Sotomayor's dissenting opinion in a case called McMahon v. New York. It's dated July 14, 2025.
Right. And it gives this really critical, almost you could say alarming view on the main court's decision. They decided to grant something called a stay on a lower court's order.
A stay meaning like a pause.
Exactly. It pauses the lower court's ruling that tried to stop the administration's actions. So the fight goes on, but the actions can continue for now.
Okay, let's unpack this whole thing, starting with the administration's plan. This wasn't exactly subtle, was it? The president was pretty open about wanting to close the department.
Oh, absolutely not subtle. During the campaign, President Trump said multiple times he planned to, quote, close up the Department of Education and send all education back to the states. And he wanted it done, quote, early in the administration.
So a clear campaign promise.
Definitely. And it didn't stop after the election. He actually told the press something like, you can do a lot of things without Congress, and specifically mention a virtual closure of the department.
A virtual closure? What does that even mean?
Well, it seems to mean gutting it without technically needing Congress to pass a law abolishing it. After the inauguration, he called the department a big con job, wanted to close it immediately.
Wow.
And he even told his nominee for Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon, that her goal should be to, quote, put herself out of a job. That was the mission from day one.
So McMahon gets confirmed. What does she actually do? Does she act on this?
Immediately. Her first day, she puts out a memo, talks about leading the department's final mission, basically fulfilling those campaign promises.
Okay.
But the really big move came about a week later. March 11, 2025, she announced a reduction in force, or RIF.
RIF, like layoffs.
Massive layoffs. This RIF eliminated nearly 50% of the department's workforce. The staff numbers dropped from over 4,100 down to just under 2,200.
Half the department, just like that.
Just like that. Half the staff, almost overnight.
That's staggering.
Yeah.
What did that actually mean for the department's work? I mean, which parts got hit?
It wasn't just trimming fat, entire offices, really critical teams were just gone or decimated.
Like what?
Well, the Office of English Language Acquisition, basically gone, responsible for bilingual education programs. All the specialists in the General Counsel's office dealing with K-12 funding and IDA grants, terminated.
IDA, that's special education. Yeah.
Exactly. And they cut 7 out of 12 regional offices for the Office of Civil Rights. Most of the federal student aid office that, certifies schools so they can get federal financial aid, gutted.
That's the core of student loans and grants.
Right. And the whole unit in the Office of Special Education that gives guidance on complying with IDEA, eliminated entirely.
So these aren't minor changes. This sounds like hitting the absolute core functions. How did they explain this? Was it just, we need to be more efficient?
That's where it gets kind of murky. The official directive, the March 11 one, it gave sort of competing reasons. It mentioned the final mission, but also talked about a commitment to efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
And it claimed the department would somehow still deliver on all statutory programs despite losing half its people.
Which sounds difficult.
Right. And McMahon herself later confirmed to the press this was just the first step on the road to a total shutdown.
She actually said that.
Yep. And then in a congressional hearing in June 2025, she was asked point blank if they'd done any analysis on how this huge RIF would impact the department's ability to actually do its legally required job. Her answer, no.
No analysis. Just cut half the staff and claim deficiency while aiming for a shutdown.
That's what the record strongly suggests, yes.
Yeah.
The efficiency argument looks, well, pretty thin.
What was happening inside the department during all this? Must have been chaos.
Total disruption, according to the court documents. Some units were apparently asked after the firings to list their legally required tasks, making any kind of smooth handover impossible.
Right, the people who knew how to do the job were already gone.
Exactly. They were immediately locked out of their work systems. The acting secretary apparently told staff the department was winding down and wouldn't be responsible for meeting its statutory functions anymore.
So not just layoffs, but actively winding down operations.
It certainly looks like a deliberate dismantling from within.
And then they made it official, right, with an executive order.
They did, March 20, 2025. Executive Order 14242. The title leaves no doubt. Closing the Department of Education and returning authority to the states.
Doesn't get much clearer than that.
Nope. It directed the secretary to, quote, take all necessary steps to facilitate the closure. And the very next day, March 21st, another order announced transfers of functions. Student loans were going to the Small Business Administration.
The SBA. That seems odd.
Right. And special needs and nutrition programs were heading to Health and Human Services, HHS.
Okay, wow. That's a pretty aggressive sequence of events. To really get the stakes here, maybe we should step back. What exactly is the Department of Education supposed to do? And where does Congress fit in? This isn't a new agency right here.
Not at all. Federal involvement in education goes way back, like over 150 years, supporting states, local schools, even private education.
Yeah.
But the department itself, as a cabinet-level agency, was established by Congress in 1979. The whole point, the stated goal in the law, was to strengthen the federal commitment to ensuring access to equal educational opportunity for every individual.
Okay, so equal opportunity is key. What are its main jobs today? How big is its reach?
It's huge. Its responsibilities touch pretty much every state, every community. Think about financial aid. It runs the whole federal student aid system. We're talking over $120 billion a year to more than 13 million students as of mid-2025.
That's massive. Loans, grants.
Yep. Pell Grants, federal work-study, loans for college, technical schools. Plus, it sends billions directly to K-12 public schools. In 2020-21, it was over $100 billion, which is roughly 11% of all public school funding nationwide.
So a major funding source. What else? You mentioned equal opportunity and civil rights earlier.
Absolutely critical function. The Department's Office of Civil Rights is responsible for enforcing anti-discrimination laws in any school or program that gets federal money. That includes Title VI, race, color, national origin, Title IX, sex discrimination, and the Americans with Disabilities Act, Title II.
So they're the watchdog making sure federal dollars don't support discrimination.
Exactly. And then there's special education. It runs the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act idea that funds and supports services for over 7 million students with disabilities, plus Title I funding for schools with many low-income families. Basically, schools and students everywhere rely on these programs.
Okay, so it does a lot, which brings us back to Congress. If Congress created the department and gave it all these jobs, can the president just undo that?
Well, that's the core constitutional question here, and the law seems pretty clear. Congress actually puts specific limits in place. The organic statute, the law creating the department, explicitly prohibits the secretary from just abolishing the main organizational parts Congress set up.
So Congress said you can't just get rid of these offices.
Pretty much. For other parts, maybe things transferred into the department later, the secretary can only consolidate, alter, or discontinue some of them, and even then, only after giving Congress 90 days notice and a detailed report.
Okay, so there are rules, procedures.
Yes. And the fundamental principle rooted in the Constitution's Take Care Clause is that Congress writes the laws, and the president's job is to, quote, faithfully execute them, not ignore them, not repeal them by just firing everyone needed to carry them out.
Right. Only Congress can actually abolish the department through legislation.
That's the constitutional framework. The executive's job is implementation, not abolition by other means.
So given that framework, when the administration started this dismantling process, people pushed back legally, right? Who sued?
Yes, the legal challenges came quickly. There were two main groups of plaintiffs. One was a coalition of 20 states, plus the District of Columbia.
20 states. That's significant.
It is. And the other group, included school districts and teachers' unions. Their argument was basically that these executive actions amounted to an illegal, effective dismantling of the department.
And what laws did they say were violated?
They argued it violated the separation of powers between Congress and the president's duty under the Take Care Clause to faithfully execute laws, and also the Administrative Procedure Act, the APA.
The APA. That's about agencies following proper procedures,
Yeah.
right? Making reasoned decisions.
They argued these actions were arbitrary and capricious without proper justification.
Did they have proof of actual harm? Or was it just theoretical?
Oh, they brought receipts, as they say. Dozens of sworn statements, affidavits detailing real immediate harm.
Like what kind of harm?
School districts talked about how dependent they are on getting federal funds on time. Even short delays mean they have to cut staff, cut programs, and several states reported experiencing exactly those kinds of delays right after that March 11th RAF.
So funding streams were actually disrupted.
Yes. And colleges, universities too. They rely on getting timely certifications to participate in federal financial aid programs. Delays meant they literally had to turn away students who needed that aid.
Can you give a specific example? Sometimes the details really hit home.
Sure. There was a technical college in Washington state. Normally, their recertification for financial aid takes less than 7 weeks. After the RF, it took 18.5 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah. Their enrollment dropped to less than a fifth of what they expected. They lost tuition revenue, students lost opportunities.
That's concrete damage. Any others?
Plenty. New York State's Education Department reported delays in drawing down its federal funds. We're talking billions, like $15.7 billion. New Jersey tried to get help withdrawing funds and was told the help desk had severe staffing restraints. Illinois said it just couldn't access certain funding categories at all after March 1st.
So states couldn't get their money out.
I remember the Office of English Language Acquisition, completely abolished. That directly disrupted funding and services for English language learners across the country.
It really sounds like the system was grinding to a halt in key areas.
That's what the evidence showed. Scores of officials, even a former Secretary of Education, testified that the department simply could not meet its legal obligations with those staffing cuts. They couldn't administer programs like the Workforce Innovation Act, ECA Title III, federal student aid, critical research functions, even basic legal counsel functions were impaired.
And what was the government's response to all this evidence of harm in court? Did they try to refute it?
This is striking. Their defense was essentially just repeating that the firings were about streamlining. But according to the lower courts, they submitted zero evidence to counter the plaintiff's detailed factual record showing the department was crippled.
They just stuck to the streamlining story without proof.
Apparently so. They didn't engage with the evidence of harm presented by the states and school districts.
How did the first court, the district court, react to that?
They were not persuaded by the government's argument at all. On May 22, 2025, the district court issued a strong ruling. It said the record abundantly reveals that defendants' true intention is to effectively dismantle the department without an authorizing statute.
So the court saw through the streamlining claim.
Completely. It found the terminations would stop the department from doing its job, likely violated the separation of powers and the Take Care Clause, and violated the APA because there was no reasoned explanation, making the cuts arbitrary and capricious.
And what did the court order?
A pretty sweeping preliminary injunction. It blocked the government from carrying out the March 11 RIF directive, the closing the department executive order, and the order transferring functions to SBA and HHS.
Wow. And did it say anything about the fired employees?
Yes, it actually ordered the department to reinstate federal employees to the extent needed to restore its ability to function properly.
So a major setback for the administration's plan. Did the government appeal this?
They did. They asked the next court, up the First Circuit Court of Appeals, to put the district court's injunction on hold to issue a stay.
And what did the First Circuit say?
They said no. They denied the stay. The First Circuit pointed out that the government didn't even try to argue against the district court's factual findings based on the evidence. And they agreed that the plaintiffs, the states, and schools were facing serious, irreparable harms if the dismantling continued.
Okay, so two courts looked at the evidence, heard the arguments, and both said, stop, you can't do this.
That's right. Two federal courts ruled against the administration's actions based on the record presented.
Which makes the Supreme Court's next move even more significant. What did the highest court decide?
Well, this brings us to the main event, really. On July 14th, 2025, the Supreme Court granted the government's request for a stay.
Wait, they overturned the lower courts? They allowed the firings and dismantling to continue?
Essentially, yes, for now. Granting the stay means the district court's injunction, the order to stop the RAF, reinstate employees, block the executive orders, is paused, put on hold while the full appeal process plays out.
So the administration gets the green light to proceed, at least temporarily.
Exactly. And that's what prompted the powerful dissent from Justice Sotomayor, joined by Justices Kagan and Jackson.
What was the core of their disagreement? Why did they think granting this stay was so wrong?
The dissent pulls no punches. It calls the decision indefensible. Justice Sotomayor argues it basically gives the executive a roadmap to repeal statutes by firing all those necessary to carry them out.
A roadmap to repeal laws without Congress.
That's the fear expressed. She calls it a grave threat to the separation of powers. The dissent emphasizes that this kind of emergency relief, a stay from the Supreme Court, is meant only for truly extraordinary circumstances.
And the government didn't meet that high bar, especially after losing twice below.
That's the dissent's point. They argue the government faced an especially heavy burden here and didn't meet it. Two lower courts had already looked at the facts and denied this exact relief.
What about the underlying constitutional principles? What did the dissent say was really at stake?
It goes right back to basics. Congress makes the laws. The president's duty is to faithfully execute them, full stop. The dissent states flatly, there is no provision in the Constitution that authorizes the president to enact, to amend, or to repeal statutes.
So they saw this not just as bad policy, but as fundamentally undermining how our government's supposed to work.
Precisely. They view the administration's actions as an attempt to bypass Congress and effectively repeal laws through administrative action, which directly challenges the legislative branch's power.
And the government's whole streamlining excuse. Did the dissent buy that?
Not for a second. The dissent says the record unambiguously refutes the claim it was just about cutting bureaucratic bloat. They point straight to the president's own words, the campaign promises, Secretary McMahon's total shutdown comments, her admission of no impact analysis.
So the evidence pointed away from efficiency and towards intentional dismantling.
That's the dissent's reading of the record. They also slammed the government's argument that the plaintiffs hadn't shown real or imminent harm. The dissent lists those examples we talked about, the college losing students, the states with funding delays. They said the harm wasn't speculative, it was happening right now.
Okay. What about any other legal arguments the government tried, like technicalities about jurisdiction?
The dissent addressed those too. The government argued a law called the Civil Service Reform Act meant the courts didn't have jurisdiction. The dissent said, basically, that's wrong. The lawsuit isn't about individual firing decisions. It's about the unconstitutional dismantling of an entire agency.
Makes sense. It's a bigger issue than just personnel moves.
Right. And they also said the government's complaints about the remedy, the order to reinstate employees, were either raised too late or should be sorted out by the lower courts first, not jump straight to the Supreme Court for emergency relief.
So, legally and factually, the dissent found the government's case very weak. What about just the basic fairness of it all, the equities, as lawyers say?
Yeah, the dissent hits this hard. It says the equities cut against the government. They found it troubling that the administration kept pushing what the dissent called a plainly pretextual explanation, the streamlining story, while asking the court for this extraordinary relief.
Like, you can't ask for fairness while not being straight about your reasons.
That seems to be the sentiment. And then there's the balance of harms. This was a huge point for the dissent.
How so?
They argued the harms are vastly disproportionate. On one side, the government complains about the cost of paying employees. It fired what the dissent calls pocketbook harms the government brought on itself. But on the other side, the dissent says the harm to the nation's education system and individual students is of a far greater magnitude. Lifting the injunction, allowing the dismantling to proceed, will unleash untold harm.
Untold harm? Like what specifically?
Delaying or denying education opportunities, leaving students vulnerable to discrimination because the civil rights enforcement is weakened, undermining special education support. The dissent basically says it's deeply unfair to prioritize saving the government money it shouldn't have spent firing people in the first place over preventing this massive, real harm to the public.
So putting it all together, what we've really dug into here is this huge clash, right, between the president's power and Congress's authority, playing out over an agency that touches almost everyone's lives.
Exactly. And the dissent really paints this vivid picture of a constitutional fight, arguing the Supreme Court's decision to step back and allow the dismantling, even temporarily, sets a potentially dangerous precedent.
It definitely leaves you thinking. If the executive can effectively cripple or close an agency this way, as the dissent describes, what does that signal about the balance of power moving forward?
Right. And what could it mean for other federal agencies, for any law Congress passes that a future administration might strongly disagree with? Could they just defund it by firing everyone?
It raises some fundamental questions about how our government functions, about accountability, and really about the future of the services we rely on the federal government to provide. Lots to chew on there.